Hey guys, it's Bassima, remote work and productivity. Okay, so let's get right into it. If you're new here, my degree is in industrial engineering and my work experience is mainly in project management. And so I had about 2 years in corporate experience within project management before I made the decision to quit my full-time corporate job for good. And so in today's live video, I wanted to share with you the lessons that I've learned over the past 2 years of quitting my job. In case this is something that you've been considering or you've been looking up videos on YouTube on how to quit your job, what signs to look out for, what to do after quitting your job, how to prep for quitting your job, or even just how to make money online so that you can get out. Because I know that's where I was in terms of my corporate job. I didn't have necessarily a toxic work environment. So I actually really enjoyed working with my boss and my colleague, but I just didn't like the corporate lifestyle. It didn't work well for me working within an office space. And so I talk a lot about this on my channel. So it's important to know who you are as a person when it comes to work, and corporate just was not for me. So when I actually made the decision to quit my job, it was a couple of months before I actually followed through on it. And so I was taking a couple of months to think of like the reason why, like what am I going to say to quit? What am I going to say when I actually do go through with it in terms of quitting my job? And what would I do next and things like that. I wanted to prepare myself as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it's important to remember like there's never going to be that perfect time. You're never going to feel fully prepared. So I had done different courses, I had done a certification in terms of coaching, and I had even taken on some freelancing clients and things like that. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do once I quit my job. So I pretty much didn't have a plan when I made that decision. But I did know that corporate wasn't for me. And so I wanted to work remotely. So today's live video is going to be about the lessons I've learned over the past 2 years to hopefully give you guys some insight, and you guys can also ask some questions if you have any in terms of what it's like to work remotely, if this is something that's been on your mind or you have any concerns. I'd love to hear from you either now during the live or even afterwards, and I'll definitely get back to any of the comments. So the first thing that I learned over the past 2 years is that it's okay if you have to work something part-time so that you can continue working towards your goals. So this is oftentimes a struggle if you've done some type of university degree or if you've worked many years of experience. You always feel like if you're leaving your job, then you're leaving all that knowledge and that work experience behind. When in fact, it's totally okay if you prefer to work a part-time job while you continue working towards your goals and no longer choosing to be within that corporate environment. So for me, I prefer to have a part-time job, continue working towards my goals, and then instead of just staying in corporate full-time and never feeling like I had the time and energy to do or explore the other things I was interested in. So the reason why I mention this is because on my channel, you'll see me talk a lot about teaching English as a second language. And so this was where I started off in terms of my part-time job. So my part-time job was remote, which was great because it did introduce me to the world of working online. And at the same time, I found out that I ended up really enjoying it, especially working with adults. So I still continue to do it part-time. So this was something that I started off in terms of a means to an end, and I'm still continuing doing now because I do really like it. So that's lesson number one. It's okay to work something part-time while you continue to work towards your dreams. Now, the next thing that I thought was really interesting, and I learned that after leaving my full-time job, was the fact that don't be surprised if you begin to see opportunity everywhere around you. And so what ends up happening when you're in corporate oftentimes is that you oftentimes can feel stuck, especially if you're not crazy about your job or you don't like what you're doing. It's easy to just feel like you have no other choice but to stay there. And so the first thing that I noticed is that once I actually left my full-time job, I started to see opportunity all around me. I started to see that I could do so many things that I never knew were possible, and it just really opened my eyes to all the options that were out there. And so this can be a little distracting when there is a lot of opportunity around you, but it was still worth it for me to leave corporate and be dealing with so much more opportunity than it was to stay in corporate and consistently feel like I was stuck. So obviously, if you're feeling all this opportunity, your excitement is going to be at an all-time high when you first leave corporate. So definitely ride that wave. And then the next thing I would say is to focus on your transferable skills. So I did do a video in terms of making a career transition. And the reason why I say to focus on your transferable skills is because if you're like me, when I was in corporate, I didn't feel like I had a niche. So I didn't feel like I was particularly an expert at any one thing at that time. So I was more like a generalist that had multiple different interests, but I didn't feel like I was particularly great at one thing. And so that was one thing. Another thing was that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do instead. So having these different emotions and thoughts can be really confusing and can hold you back for a long time, even after you quit your job. So if this is something that you're currently dealing with, if you're about to quit your job or you've quit your job, then the one thing that I would advise you is to focus on your transferable skills. So these are skills like communication, analytical skills, coordination skills, mathematical skills, anything that you can potentially monetize. Then those are the skills that you want to focus on because they can be translated across a lot of different industries, departments, jobs, and it can make it so much simpler for you to start getting out of your own way, to actually start freelancing, start your own business, and just generally start working remotely. So that's number 3. Let's go into the next one. So I'm just looking over here so I don't forget all the lessons that I've learned. Okay, so the next thing is, especially if you're a morning person, so this was a huge benefit for me, is that I gained my mornings back, which was priceless. So if you feel super productive in the morning and you have a lot of resentment towards your job because you either have long commutes or you start really early in the morning and it eats up away from that time that you really thrive in, then this was one of the main benefits for me. So I actually got my mornings back. Now there are a lot of corporate companies that might have flex time, so they'll allow you to come in anywhere between 7 to 9 a.m. most companies. But still with commuting and getting ready and all of that, it can just feel like that time just goes by so quickly and you don't have much time to do anything else. So once I actually gained back that time, I was able to actually start doing my creative work in the morning, working out in the morning, doing the things that I enjoyed when there was actual light out. So I'd always get annoyed when I'd come back home from my full-time job and it would be dark outside and I just never had any energy to do anything else after my job. So this was a huge benefit for me. Now, if we're to look at some of the downsides, which I think is also important to consider after you leave your job, the first thing is that not everyone is going to be supportive of your journey. And so I still have people that ask me if I miss working in engineering within corporate. And the honest answer is that I don't miss corporate for a second. And so I felt like I was missing more while I was there than working for myself. And this was definitely because I didn't feel like I had the ability to make the impact that I am able to make now. And so I really felt like I was restricted in terms of the impact that I could make within corporate. So even though I didn't have the support of everyone, especially in terms of quitting my job, and then even now, still not everyone is supportive of all the different things that I'm doing. It still is worth it for me. So just to remember that not everyone's going to be supportive of your journey. And as long as that you believe it's the right decision for you, then keep following through on it, keep moving through the challenges that come after leaving your job. Now, the next thing, which I do talk a lot about on my channel as well, and is that it's not all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to time management. And so I'm sure a lot of people really got a taste of this, especially during COVID, because a lot of companies did go remote. But the one thing is that even though time management is always a work in progress, it becomes increasingly difficult when you're working from home. So because anything and everything can distract you, especially if your partner also works from home, or your family, your siblings, your kids, it can be very distracting. And so this is one thing that you want to keep in mind, that might be a challenge, and to kind of set up some type of structure for yourself so that you're not always being pulled in so many different directions and getting distracted. And even though you left your job, you still don't feel like you're doing the things that you want to do. The other thing in terms of time management when you start working remotely, which was shocking to me after I left my job, was the increase in options. So the fact that you have so many options available to you can also keep you feeling distracted, not seeing the momentum and the progress that you want, because your focus is consistently shifting from one thing to the other, and you can feel like you have so many thoughts and so many ideas running through your head, and then you find yourself starting things, leaving them, and then moving on to something else. So it can be very challenging at the beginning, and to find that balance between perfectionism and completely letting go might take you some time. So don't be surprised by that after you leave your job. This was something that I was really surprised by, because I thought the fact that I would have more time open to me, more freedom available, then I would be more productive. But that wasn't the case, especially at the beginning. And I still go through periods now where I really have to rely on my structure in order to manage my time. Now, okay, so the next lesson, which is also completely normal and I think super important to keep in mind, is that self-doubt, fear, and lack of confidence will kick in pretty quickly when after you quit your job and starting to transition into remote work. And the reason for this is that there is a learning curve, because it is something new that you haven't done before. And so it can be very difficult to feel like you're super confident, that it's gonna for sure turn out to be successful, whatever it is that you're doing. And so this is why I mentioned focusing on your skill set earlier, because as long as you know that you're focusing on your skill set, which you want to keep improving and building on, then that's what's going to help you to keep taking those small steps and moving through those different fears, self-doubt, lack of confidence that you might feel at the beginning. So that's definitely my recommendation for that. You left corporate for a reason. You left your full-time job, any kind of job, even not necessarily in corporate. So it's really important to give yourself the opportunity to see what it is that you can do on your own. And so if you feel like your fears are consistently getting in the way, which is completely normal, especially at the beginning, and really try to rely on your skill set. Really focus down, drill down on what is it that you can bring to the marketplace, what is it that you would like to improve on if you don't necessarily feel like you're great at it yet, and continue to work on that and let that be your North Star through all those fears so that it doesn't hinder your progress. Now, even with all these fears, there's still never a day where I feel like going back. So even going through this like uncomfortable phase was way more worth it for me than staying in the comfort of corporate. So that's something else that I learned within these past 2 years. And then the last and most important lesson is to be comfortable with giving yourself the validation you need. And so oftentimes when you're working remotely, you're starting something new for yourself, you're starting to freelance, starting your own business. Instant gratification tends to take a backseat, which is normal. It's going to require some patience. And if you're like me, I really do consider that I have a level of patience. And so this was extremely difficult for me at the beginning. Freelancer, as someone wanting to start a business, it was difficult to not know the exact steps that I need to take, not have someone like patting me on the shoulder telling me like you're doing a great job. It was pretty much me having to rely on myself to give myself that validation to continue moving forward. So I think that's really important. this will definitely be different if you're working remotely, but you're working with a company, because it's still corporate but working remotely. So you will have those clear objectives that you need to reach. You will have those clear steps that you need to take in order to go up the ladder. But if you're not working with a remote company, if you're working on your own or you're freelancing, then it's going to be more difficult to get that pat on the back, know that for sure whatever it is that you're doing is going to pay off. And so it's important to give yourself that validation so that you can continue taking those little steps and get to where it is that you want to be. So these are some of the lessons that I learned over the past 2 years of leaving my 9 to 5 job to work remotely. And I'd love to hear from you down below if you have any questions, either now or after this live, and I'll get back to you if this is something that's been on your mind and you've been wanting to quit your job but you haven't gone through with it yet. I hope this gave you some insight as to what it looked like for me, and some motivation if it's something that you feel is no longer serving you and you want to take a different direction, that you're able to do so.